All right, let's talk about the 2026 tax season because it is shaping up to be something we have never, ever seen before. We're talking about a potential record-breaking amount of cash heading straight for American bank accounts. So what in the world is behind this, and what could it actually mean for you? Let's dive in and unpack it.
I mean, you heard it right there. That's a quote from the head of the IRS promising the biggest refunds that we've ever seen. That is a huge statement to make. But okay, beyond the headline, what does this actually look like in real dollars and cents? And how did we even get to this point?
So to really get our heads around this, we're going to look at it from a few different angles. First, we'll tackle the sheer size of these refunds. Then, we'll look at the other financial promises being talked about. We're also going to uncover the specific bill that kicked this all off, figure out who's really going to benefit the most, and finally, explore the big economic debate that this is starting.
Okay, so let's jump right into the numbers. When officials are throwing around words like historic, what are they actually talking about? You know, how much bigger could these refunds really be? Well, one look at this chart, and you can see the jump pretty clearly. For the last few years, the average tax refund has been kind of hovering around that $3,000 mark. But in 2026, it's projected to leap to over $4,000. Now, for the average American family, an extra $1,000 is not just a number on a chart. That's a huge deal. That could be a month of groceries, a sudden car repair, or a serious boost to your savings. And if we zoom out from the individual level, the scale is just staggering. The Treasury Secretary estimates that somewhere between $100 and $150 billion in total is going to flow back to taxpayers. To put that into perspective, that's like a massive wave of cash being pumped directly into the hands of consumers all across the country.
But believe it or not, the story doesn't actually end with that one bigger refund check. There are some other promises and proposals floating around that could add even more to the total payout.
This table right here is really key to understanding the whole picture. That bigger tax refund we've been talking about, that's listed as expected. It's based on laws already on the books. But then look at the other two items. A tariff dividend, which is basically a proposed payment to citizens that will be funded by taxes on imported goods, and new healthcare credits. It is so important to see that these are currently just proposed. They would still need to get through Congress before they become a reality. And then there's this really interesting little detail. You remember those stimulus payments from 2021? Well, the sources we looked at point out a special provision for anyone who, for whatever reason, missed out on claiming theirs. They're actually going to get a second chance to file for that $1,400 during this 2026 tax season. Okay, so this all brings up a massive question. Why? Why is all of this happening now? This isn't just a random event. There's a very specific piece of legislation that's the engine behind this whole thing. And the answer lies in a piece of legislation that's been called the One Big Beautiful Bill. The main thing this bill did was take the 2017 tax cuts, you might remember them as the TCJA, and make them permanent. Plus, it introduced some new deductions that are just now really kicking in.
So how did that bill lead to these giant refunds? Well, it's actually a fascinating little technical quirk. Think about it like this. The bill was passed in the middle of the year, but its tax cuts applied to the entire year retroactively. The thing is, the IRS didn't have time to tell employers to update how much tax they should be withholding from everyone's paychecks. And what's the result? For months and months, millions of workers were simply overpaying their taxes without even realizing it. So this giant 2026 refund is basically the government giving all that overpaid money back to you in one big lump sum.
Okay, now for the part I'm sure you've been waiting for. Who is actually going to see the biggest boost in their bank account from all of this?
Well, according to the sources, the benefits are designed to be pretty widespread. I mean, the head of the IRS himself said that over 94% of middle-class families should expect a tax cut, and as you can see from this list, there are also some very specific provisions aimed at helping out families with kids, workers who get tips or overtime, and seniors.
So, for all you parents out there, the change is pretty simple. The child tax credit used to be $2,000 per child. Now it's getting a $200 bump, bringing the new total up to $2,200 for this tax season.
And for seniors, the impact is really something else. A married couple, if they're both over 65, can now combine the new, higher standard deduction with an additional deduction just for seniors. The result is pretty incredible. They can have access to $43,500 completely tax-free. That is a huge deal. Now, there is one really important catch here that the sources make crystal clear. There is an important eligibility requirement. These tax benefits and refunds are structured to be available exclusively to American citizens. So, we've looked at the numbers, we've seen who benefits, but what happens to the entire economy when you pump up to $150 billion into it seemingly all at once? As you can probably guess, not everyone sees eye to eye on the answer.
One of the biggest worries you hear about is, you guessed it, inflation. This quote from one of our sources really captures that fear perfectly. The concern is that a sudden flood of spending money could just drive up prices for everything, from gas to groceries, and feel a lot like some of the inflation we've seen recently.
But there's another way to look at this, and it's a really compelling one. A tax strategist in another source points out that a tax refund isn't a gift, it's your own money that you overpaid throughout the year. From this perspective, you've basically just given the IRS an interest-free loan, and now you're finally getting your money back.
So, where does that leave us? This 2026 tax season is shaping up to be a massive economic event, no matter how you slice it. Is it a powerful stimulus that's going to boost the economy? Or is it just a giant payback for an interest-free loan we all gave the government? The truth is probably somewhere in the middle. But the real question for all of us is, what are the ripple effects going to be, not just for the economy, but for our own wallets? That's a question we'll all be watching very closely.